Hello. So this pod book is called Why Your Life Really Matters. But if one day it just ends, does it really matter? Yes, we could be on this amazing evolutionary journey of becoming, of co-creating ourselves, of experiencing these sublime spiritual states. But if it just stops, for you, for me, for everyone we love, does it have any real significance? Or just some kind of temporary significance? So in this chapter, I want to explore death. And I've been suggesting throughout this pod book that there's a number of important spiritual ideas that we don't need to just abandon, but to understand in a new post-scientific way, in a way that's able to integrate with the amazing understanding of the world that we've now got, and which is evolving all the time. And the idea I want to explore in this chapter is the idea that the soul is immortal. That's the traditional way of putting it. So why would you even consider this? Well, my own personal reasons, if I'm completely frank, are just that I've been around death a lot. I've worked with people who are dying. I've run events for people who are dying. And what I've always sensed around death is that some important transition is happening, not the end. But I could be wrong about that, of course. That's anecdotal. But there's more than just anecdotal evidence. There's lots of anecdotal evidence which then becomes statistical evidence. And I'll go into the many different forms of evidence in later chapters, but here I just want to focus on perhaps the most interesting thing for me, which is the near-death experience. When someone dies, often when their brain is being measured so that they're brain dead, and they have these amazing experiences where they meet their loved ones, they come into the presence of a love light, they exist in these amazing imaginal environments, and then they're brought back and they tell the story. Now, this is why, people say to me all the time, if I talk about life after death, they go, well, Tim, there's no real evidence, is there? And I really want to say here, look, that's just wrong. There's a lot of evidence just with the near-death experiences. We have hundreds of thousands of accounts. That's a lot of evidence. The problem isn't the lack of evidence. The issue is, how the hell do you interpret that? Do you take it on face value? These people, nearly all of them, are coming back going, I experienced life after death. They're not going, oh, something weird happened, I don't know what it was. They lose their fear of death. They're very inspired by the experience. Do you take it on face value and go, oh, right, okay. Like someone in the early days of Western culture going across to the other side of the world and going, oh, I've been to the other side of the world and there's another country. Do you just believe them and go, oh, wow? Or do you just think, nah, travelers, they just make up stuff? And what I'm urging is that we start with, could that be right? Now, there might be other explanations. I haven't seen any that are convincing, and we'll have a chapter discussing some of the other explanations, which I really don't think work. But right now, let's be generous. Let's go, oh, maybe that's right. And let's just take on how prevalent this is. The estimates that have been made by researchers, and there's lots of research now, is that around 17% of those people who die and are then revived come back with one of these stories. And we're not talking about a certain type of person. We're talking about all types of people, all ages, children, adults, all backgrounds, religious folks, atheists, scientists, every class, every country. It's a human experience. If this was a disease, that we had this much evidence for, we'd be spending a lot of money to find out what it is. Why aren't we doing that? Well, I think it comes down to this. A lovely example of it is an interview that I happened to just see recently with Richard Dawkins, who is an amazing scientist. I have huge respect for him. Great thinker, huge contribution, good man. And he was asked by an interviewer, somewhat foolishly perhaps, do you think there's life after death? And you could see the look on his face of frustration, and he just went, look, it's just impossible. There it is. That is why we're not moving faster in our understanding of this. It's just impossible. Forget it. Whatever the NDE shows, it can't be life after death. It must be something else. We don't know what it is yet, but we'll find it. Because otherwise, it's just impossible. How can there be experience when the brain is dead? Well, we don't know yet, but there will be an explanation, because the idea that it survives death is just impossible. Well, is it just impossible? Is that just some sort of illusion? I'm not sure it is. What Richard and others like him are saying is, from our current ontology, our way of seeing reality, it's impossible. And without wishing to be rude to Richard or any of those other great men and women who hold that view, it does remind me of what happened at the beginning of the scientific revolution with Galileo. When Galileo was there with his telescope going, look, I can show you that the earth goes around the sun. And the representatives of the church are in effect saying, that's impossible, because our current ontology does not allow for that. But it turned out it was possible. They just needed to change their ontology. And what I'm doing in this pod book is saying the same in certain respects to how we approach the ontology of science that's associated with science. So the traditional view of life after death is kind of supernatural versus natural. So the supernatural view is, yes, it can happen because you come from outside. The soul is caught in the illusion or of the material world. It's got trapped in a body, all of that stuff. And when the body dies, it's set free. It can go home. Now I'm going, look, there's no supernatural. It's all natural. But the current natural view, which is seen as the alternative, goes, the psyche is just a byproduct of the body. You've got no body, you've got no psyche. That's just not going to happen. But I've been saying, look, I think it is like that. I don't think the psyche is just a side effect of the body. I think it certainly can't be reduced to the brain, but I don't even think it's dependent on the brain. That you're a psychobiological passivity system functioning on these two levels. That's what we explored in the last chapter. Now, I just want to urge you to sit with what I'm saying as we go through and afterwards, because if I say the old common sense that everyone believed, the soul comes from outside, it survives death, it's hard to make sense of what that really means, actually. There's a lot of problems with it, but it feels familiar, so you think, oh, well, I understand it. You may agree, may not, but I understand it. Same with the new common sense. Well, it's just the body. It's just the brain. You feel like you understand it because it's so familiar now. Actually, there's all sorts of problems, some of which I've highlighted with that idea. So I'm not sure it is that easy to understand, but it's familiar. What I'm suggesting will not be familiar. So there may be a little bit more of a process to get to the simplicity of what I'm actually going to suggest right now in this chapter, which is simply this. And it really is, in essence, a very straightforward idea. You're a evolving psychobiological passivity system. Here is what it does. And it's like a program on the hard disk of the universe. And it's functioning on these two levels, the biological level and the level of the psyche. So that you're reading, responding on this level and on the level of the psyche, and you're sensing and you're psi-sensing. What I'm suggesting is when the body level, the biological level of the system can't function anymore, then you won't be sensing because you'll have no eyes and no ears. But that the psyche level of the psychobiological system, that can still function. It just carries on. So that death isn't the survival of a thing, it's the continuation of a process. The process is happening now, and it's happening on these two levels. You're functioning on the biological level, and you're functioning on the level of the psyche. When the biological level doesn't function, that carries on without this. That's it. That's the idea. That's what the immortality of the soul means from this new perspective. And it's going, look, the two options aren't it's impossible because you're the body or you're supernatural from outside. What I'm suggesting is in the evolutionary process, it has come to a place where the psyche can function without the body. It's developed to such an extent that it can just carry on. And that because you're no longer processing the material and biological levels with all of that less emergent passivity, your experience of the imaginal becomes super vivid. Really amazing. Which is what people who've had near-death experiences, of course, it's what they report. So let me try and help convey the simplicity of this idea by using an analogy. And I think about this often when I'm on Zoom with people. So let's imagine that right now you and I are having a Zoom conversation. And in that conversation, I'm just talking away, you're listening to me, you're watching me, and then suddenly you can see me, but you can't hear me. Now, this is what I think would not happen. I don't think you'd be there going, oh, that's impossible. How, the looking at Tim and the hearing Tim, they're the same thing. How can one exist without the other? I think you'd go, oh, the audio bit of the Tim Zoom program isn't working. But the video bit of the Zoom program is still working. And that's essentially what I'm saying. You're like and a program in the infoverse, which is evolved with certain patterns that repeat. That's your passivity, and it's on these two levels. And when the bit that runs the biological level glitches and it doesn't work anymore, the other bit can still carry on. And it's able to carry on because the biological level is regulating subsystems, cells, for instance. So it needs all of the cells to continue. So once it can't do that, it doesn't work. But the psyche, that level of passivity, it has no material subsystems to regulate. It's imaginal. You know, in the imagination, in the imaginal, pigs can fly because they're not actually pigs. They're images of pigs. And they haven't got the passivity of pigs, which means they don't fly. So what the psyche is doing is it's regulating or it's organizing, it's psi-sensing with images. Can it still do that? Yeah. Yeah, it's not regulating biological or material subsystems. It's not doing that. Now, one of the objections that comes up a lot with this is, Well, maybe this Zoom analogy is not quite right. Maybe it's more like floors in a building. So, there's the material level, and that's evolved into the biological level, and the biological level needs the material level. You can't just take the material level away and still have the biological. You can't. And then the psyche's arrived, and it's the same idea. You can't just take the biological away and it die and this carry on the psyche. It's like floors in a building. But I think that's wrong. I don't think that's right. I think it's more like saying with the Zoom system, you can't lose the audio without the video because the audio system came first. We developed the ability to communicate at great distances with audio. Before we communicated, we were able to see each other at great distance with video. But that doesn't make any difference. They're two integrated but separate parts of the system. And I think it's more like that. The essential idea of emergence is that the new thing comes from what came before. So it is absolutely right that you could not have the psyche, you couldn't have psi sensing until you got the biological senses, because psi sensing uses the images from the sensory experience to create the imaginal level. That's right. But that's a different thing to saying you must still always be experiencing the biological senses to psi sense. That's not necessarily true. In fact, I don't think it is true. Emergence is a constant process of new things coming from old things, but we don't need the old things still to be there. Human beings came from the first mammals, but the first mammals have all died out. We're still going. That's fine. New things come from old things, and the old things can be left behind, except they're not left behind because they're still in the past. And the past is what's informing the passivity of the present. So in that way, nothing's left behind. And this is an important idea I want to end with here, which is a very traditional idea, because the soul is seen as supernatural. As you die and you go off somewhere, some other reality. I'm not saying that. I'm saying everything is one process of becoming, including what happens after the death of the body. Everything is a branch on the tree, the universal evolutionary tree, in which everything has emerged from what came before, and that when the psyche continues after the death of the body, it is still part of that. It's the continuation of you. The process is still happening, and within you is all of your biological past, all of that back, all through all of the evolution of everything in the universe. So that this imaginal state that you're exploring after death isn't somewhere separate. It's you're already experiencing it, because it's the psyche. It becomes much more vivid, and you're able to enter deeper into what I've called the ecology of souls, the level of reality explored by spirituality. Okay, so what I've been saying, look, the options are not either the reductionist, it's impossible, you're just a body thing, or the supernatural. Those are not the options. Here's another option. Based on the ontology that everything is this process of becoming, in which the universe picks up patterns or passivity systems which repeat, and that identifies the identity of every system. You are that on the level of the biology, but has also evolved onto the level of the psyche, the imaginal, and that these two parts of the system are definitely working together, but the psyche is not reliant on or built on the lower level. It's emerged from it for sure, and it contains that past within it, within the system, but it's able to function now on its own. And when the biological system fails, it can still continue. And so that the survival of death is the continuation of the process that's happening to you right now. Just that the biological element, your biological sense experience will stop, and your imaginal experience will become much, much, much more vivid. And we'll explore in the next chapter what that could mean. What happens after death. Okay, let's I can end with this, actually. People often think that the question of life after death is some sort of obsession with the self. It's like, oh, you just can't face your own annihilation. I really find that distasteful because, first of all, what's wrong with that? But secondly, there's all your loved ones, there's your children. It's like we're not just talking about an inability to be macho enough to face extinction. We're talking about something much more than that. There's more riding on this, it seems to me. And I know for myself, one of the things that's riding on it is the question of whether existence is indeed benign or meaningful, whether our lives really matter. Because if the story continues, there is a way of redeeming the suffering of life. Redeeming the awfulness of old age, which is otherwise a pointless decline. Childhood, illness and death. All of those horrors. If it just, some poor child is born, has this awful experience and dies, it's very hard to see existence as mattering. Maybe it matters for me, but not for them. But if actually that's a phase in a greater journey, terrible as it is redeemable because the process of evolution continues. And just like the awful things that happen within a life can be redeemed by the future, so the awful things that happen to bring about the end of a life can be redeemed because there is a future. And my profound intuition that I take very seriously when I come into the unividual communion, when I come into that big love, when I come into that connection with this greater intelligence, is that the suffering of life is redeemable. And that existence has evolved to a level now where the individual is not something that can be just discarded. That the individual has evolved to be really significant. And that individuality is the psyche now. It's evolved from the body, but it's the psyche. And the psyche continues. Join me in the next chapter where I'm going to explore what do we experience after death. And can I point you to my newsletter? If you'd like to hear about interviews I do, other people's podcasts that I'm on, and the events I'm running, if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll receive a regular update on all those activities.